Are we witnessing a fundamental shift in global military power? What happens when supposedly impenetrable defense systems face a threat they were never designed to stop? The hypersonic phase has just begun. Everything you have watched until now, the carrier group retreating, the THAAD radar destroyed, the Patriot batteries cut in half, the cluster missiles over Tel Aviv, the oil refineries burning across the Gulf, all of that was Iran clearing the path. The path is now completely clear. Iran has just launched the Fateh hypersonic missile. And if those words do not immediately tell you why the next 72 hours are the most dangerous in this conflict, let us break down exactly what that weapon is. Because once you understand the physics, you will understand why every defense contractor, every Pentagon general, and every Israeli military commander is sitting in an emergency meeting right now with no good options on the table. Hypersonic means Mach 15, which is 15 times the speed of sound. That is approximately 11,500 miles per hour. A conventional ballistic missile travels at roughly Mach 5 to 7 on its descent. America's Patriot interceptors were engineered to hit those exact speeds. The THAAD system was built entirely around that specific threat profile. Every defense algorithm, every intercept calculation, and every response protocol in the American missile defense architecture was designed for an incoming threat, moving at a speed that hypersonic weapons exceed by a factor of 2 or 3. But speed is only half of why this missile cannot be stopped. The Fateh is highly maneuverable. It does not fly a predictable arc. It changes direction mid-flight, adjusting its path after launch in real time at 11,500 miles per hour. Traditional missile defense works by predicting where an incoming projectile will be in 30 seconds and putting an interceptor in that exact location. The Fateh does not stay in the location you predicted. By the time your interceptor arrives at the calculated intercept point, the Fateh is somewhere else entirely. In the range of 1,600 to 1,700 kilometers from Iran's launch positions, that range covers every American base in the Gulf, every Israeli city, every naval asset in the Arabian Sea, and every piece of infrastructure that this entire conflict has been fought over. It has a 100% bypass capability against every American defense system currently deployed in the region. That is not Iranian propaganda. That is the technical specification of what Mach 15 plus maneuverability does to systems engineered for Mach 7. Now, here is the strategic picture that makes this launch so significant beyond the raw technical specifications. Iran's campaign had 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 involved depleting American interceptor stockpiles using cheap weapons, which was accomplished. Phase 2 meant destroying the radar and early warning systems that give those interceptors their targeting data, which is also accomplished. 25 to 30% of American early warning infrastructure is gone, and half of all Patriot systems in the region are destroyed. Phase 3. Once American defenses are blind, depleted, and degraded, deploy the weapons that could not have been stopped even at full American defensive capacity. That is today. Phase 3 is today. Israel's Iron Dome is operating at roughly 50% effectiveness. America's ground-based defense systems in the Gulf are at close to 0 effectiveness. The radar systems that would guide interceptors toward incoming threats are offline or completely destroyed. And straight into that gap, into the specific window Iran spent weeks methodically creating, the Fateh hypersonic missile is now flying. The 100-foot deep reinforced concrete bunkers that Israeli military leadership retreated to when conventional missile threats became unbearable. Iran has stated clearly that those bunkers are now actively targeted. Hypersonic warheads with the penetration capability of the weapons now in the air do not stop at 100 feet of concrete. The engineering math on bunker busting at hypersonic velocities is not favorable to the people inside the bunker. Alongside the Fateh, Iran simultaneously launched the Ghadr missile, a weapon in the Shahab 3 category with a 2,000-kilometer range, and long-range strike capability designed specifically for maximum destruction against fixed military installations. 2 weapons, different profiles and complementary purposes, were launched simultaneously to split defensive attention between threat types at the precise moment defensive capacity is at its historic low. This is not mere improvisation. This is the execution of a plan that was written before the first cheap drone was ever launched. And here is the detail that should make every American taxpayer genuinely furious. Iran just hit an Amazon data center in the Gulf. This was not a military target or a weapons depot. The cloud computing infrastructure that American corporations invested billions building across the Middle East, including digital assets, financial systems, and corporate data networks, is now being systematically dismantled alongside the physical military infrastructure. Iran is not fighting a traditional military campaign anymore. Iran is conducting a comprehensive demolition of American presence, military, financial, technological, and economic, across an entire region simultaneously. And the weapons doing the demolition right now cannot be intercepted. Iran's president made a public statement. Trump heard it, twisted it, claimed it was an apology, and declared victory. Within hours of that statement, while Trump was still telling the world Iran had blinked, Iran launched the Fattah hypersonic missile package and hit Gulf targets that made clear no apology had been issued, no ceasefire had been agreed upon, and no de-escalation was coming. This is the stark gap between the information war and the actual war. And understanding that gap is critical because a significant portion of what Americans are being told about how this conflict is going is built around managing domestic political opinion rather than accurately representing battlefield reality. Think about what we know versus what we are being told. We are told American casualties at targeted installations number in single digits. What we know is that direct missile strikes on fully operational military bases, the exact kind of strikes currently being documented on video, do not produce single-digit casualties when thousands of personnel are present. The physics simply do not allow it. Soldiers stationed on those bases know the real numbers. The medical personnel treating the wounded know the real numbers. Journalists attempting to access those facilities are being actively blocked because the real numbers would completely end the political cover story. We are told Iran's missile capability is currently being degraded. What we know is that Iran just deployed hypersonic weapons it was specifically reserving for this exact phase, indicating the campaign is proceeding squarely on Iran's timeline and is not being disrupted by American or Israeli countermeasures. We are told Israel has destroyed 60% of Iranian missile infrastructure. What we know is that Iran's missile systems are underground in hardened tunnels in dispersed locations that satellite imagery cannot fully map. If 60% of Iranian missiles were truly destroyed, the rate of inbound fire would have decreased dramatically. It has not decreased at all. It has actually escalated to hypersonic speeds. The information war is being rapidly lost alongside the actual war. Now, let us talk about Europe, because a new and genuinely alarming development just changed the entire geometry of this conflict. Italy, France, and the United Kingdom are currently deploying warships to Cyprus and the broader eastern Mediterranean region. European NATO members who have been watching from the sidelines while their energy situation completely collapses are now sending military assets toward the conflict zone. Their stated rationale is preparation for potential participation if the conflict expands further. Here is the exact situation those countries are deploying from. Russia has completely cut its gas supply to Europe. Qatar, which was Europe's alternative liquefied natural gas supplier, has suspended shipments because Qatar's own infrastructure is currently under attack. Europe is heading into an energy crisis of historic proportions, without Russian gas and without Gulf gas simultaneously for the first time in the post-war era. And rather than using that desperately vulnerable moment to actively pursue de-escalation, European governments are sending warships toward the very conflict that is actively causing their energy crisis. Iran's response to this development was completely immediate and unambiguous. Anyone who enters this conflict will be treated directly as a combatant. European naval assets currently positioned in the eastern Mediterranean are now potential Iranian targets. The conflict that originally started as a regional Middle East confrontation has just acquired a massive potential European military dimension. Russia, carefully watching all of this unfold, is doing what Russia always does best in moments of Western strategic overextension. They are doing nothing dramatic, just waiting quietly and holding the gas supply hostage. They are watching European governments make decisions under extreme energy duress that they would never make from a position of true security. The exact leverage Russia could not achieve militarily against NATO is what European governments are handing over voluntarily by choosing confrontation over negotiation while their populations freeze. Meanwhile, the Gulf states, the specific countries caught in the physical center of all of this destruction, are working back channels frantically to find an exit before the hypersonic phase fully develops. The statement from the Iranian president, regardless of whatever Trump claimed it meant, contained a very real message directed specifically at Gulf leadership. Stop allowing American forces to use your territory to attack us, and we will immediately stop attacking you. That direct message landed successfully. The Gulf states heard it loud and clear, and right now, behind the public statements and the extremely careful diplomatic language, every single Gulf government is having the exact same private conversation. How do we ask America to leave without it looking like we are officially asking America to leave? Because here is what they know that their own populations are only just beginning to truly understand. The American military presence that was supposed to guarantee Gulf security has actually done the exact opposite. The bases that were supposed to deter outside aggression have essentially attracted it. The alliance that was supposed to provide steadfast protection has ultimately delivered devastating war. 40 years of a solid security arrangement just spectacularly failed its most important test. And the hypersonic missiles in the air right now are the most compelling argument anyone has ever made for a completely different arrangement. 57 Islamic nations. That is exactly how many Muslim-majority countries currently exist in the world today. 57. They have a combined population of nearly 2 billion people and combined military budgets running into the hundreds of billions of dollars. They hold combined oil and gas reserves, representing a highly significant fraction of everything the global economy currently runs on, yet not one single country among them is standing militarily alongside Iran right now. Iran is fighting America and Israel simultaneously, which are the two most militarily sophisticated nations in the entire Western alliance, backed completely by NATO's massive industrial base, enormous American weapons manufacturing, and vast Israeli intelligence infrastructure, entirely alone. And it is actually winning. That specific fact, far more than any individual missile strike, more than any fluctuating oil price number, and more than any single political development, is the main thing that is going to completely reshape the next 50 years of global history. Because what Iran is currently demonstrating entirely alone under heavy sanctions, with merely a tiny fraction of America's enormous defense budget, is that the absolute military supremacy the United States actively built over the last century is no longer the unchallengeable reality it was widely assumed to be. Every single country in the global south is carefully watching the situation unfold and quickly doing the math. The underlying math goes exactly like this. If Iran, fighting completely alone and heavily sanctioned for several decades, can destroy half of America's advanced Patriot systems in a single week, severely drain the expensive interceptor stockpile well below minimal operational effectiveness, force a massive naval carrier group into an embarrassing retreat, entirely destroy $1 billion early warning radar installation, and successfully launch deadly hypersonic missiles that absolutely no deployed American defense system can possibly intercept. What exactly does a formal American military alliance actually protect you from that? You could not just effectively manage yourself. That crucial question simply does not have the same reassuring answer it confidently had just 5 short years ago. Before we move on to the devastating economic consequences, I really want to hear your perspective on this massive global shift. Do you believe we are witnessing the permanent end of American military dominance, or is the Western alliance preparing a strategic response we simply have not seen yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below, because this is a critical debate we urgently need to have right now. Now, let us talk extensively about what comes next for the entire global economy. Because while the dramatic military developments currently dominate the front page headlines, the severe economic consequences are exactly what will deeply reach into the daily lives of absolutely every person on Earth, entirely regardless of where they happen to live or what they might personally think about the complex geopolitics. Oil is sitting at $95 today. The current trajectory model, based on existing Gulf storage capacity, projected production cut timelines, and massive shipping disruption, puts oil at roughly $120 within a matter of mere weeks. $150 is now widely discussed as a standard base case, not just some wild extreme scenario. And $200, a massive number that would have been universally considered catastrophic speculation just 3 short months ago, is now appearing regularly in serious financial analysis as a very real tail risk with entirely non-negligible probability. Here is exactly what $150 oil rapidly does to the world's highly interconnected production economy. Samsung consistently manufactures millions of smartphones over in South Korea. South Korean industrial manufacturing inevitably runs on constant energy. Energy in South Korea comes significantly from heavily imported oil and natural gas, both of which are now severely supply disrupted. When Samsung's baseline production costs inevitably spike, Samsung's retail phones immediately get much more expensive. When basic phones get noticeably more expensive, the entire interconnected consumer electronic supply chain aggressively reprices itself. Your very next smartphone inevitably costs significantly more. Your next personal laptop costs noticeably more. Every single device built on tiny components manufactured using Gulf region energy inevitably costs the end consumer much more. That is just looking at basic consumer electronics. Apply that exact same underlying logic to absolutely every single manufactured good currently available. Apply it to every essential agricultural product constantly transported by highly fuel-dependent global logistics. Apply it to every critical modern service efficiently delivered through heavily energy-dependent physical infrastructure. The massive inflationary tidal wave rapidly building in the global oil market right now is absolutely not a minor sector-specific problem. It is genuinely an everything problem. And it inevitably arrives in normal household budgets with a roughly 60 to 90-day lag from today's shockingly high oil prices. This simply means the absolute worst of it has not even been truly felt yet. Japan is deeply alarmed. South Korea is significantly alarmed. Australia is highly alarmed. Europe is already fully trapped inside a massive energy crisis. And the broader developing world, specifically countries where energy routinely represents 30, 40, or even 50% of overall household expenditure rather than the mere 8 to 12%, it typically represents in wealthy developed nations, is suddenly facing an unprecedented cost of living shock. This massive financial shock will inevitably produce widespread political instability, severe food insecurity, and truly devastating humanitarian consequences that the generally comfortable Western policy conversation regarding this specific conflict is fundamentally not adequately accounting for right now. 8 billion people are currently sitting directly downstream of terrible decisions actively being made by a very small number of isolated leaders who are absolutely not paying the personal price for those exact decisions. That exact dynamic has always been the absolute fundamental injustice sitting quietly at the very center of every great power conflict. And it has arguably never been more completely and starkly visible than it currently is right now. This occurs when a massive war intentionally launched just to serve highly specific domestic political interests is simultaneously sending unstoppable hypersonic missiles straight over populated Gulf cities and sending massive oil price shockwaves crashing directly into the fragile grocery budgets of innocent families living in Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, who genuinely had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with any of it. Here is exactly where this entire disastrous situation finally ends. It does not end with a decisive military victory. There is absolutely no viable military victory realistically available on the current dangerous trajectory for anyone involved. It does not end with a miraculous diplomatic breakthrough either. Iran's highly decentralized military command structure simply means there's absolutely no single isolated conversation that successfully stops 31 entirely active operational command centers. It only ends when the massive economic pain eventually becomes completely politically unbearable back in Washington. It ends when 90% massive domestic public opposition suddenly translates directly into severe electoral consequences, big enough to finally change the entire political calculation. It ends when all the various Gulf states finally stand up and actively say publicly what they are already quietly saying privately. America desperately needs to pack up and go. That critical breaking moment is arguably closer right now than it has ever been before. The Fattah hypersonic missile is currently flying in the air. The massive Amazon data center located in the Gulf is now completely offline. The global price of oil is rapidly heading straight toward $120. The deployed European warships are actively sailing right into a massive escalating conflict. They have absolutely no viable strategic plan to actually survive this fully intact. And somewhere deep in a heavily fortified underground facility that absolutely no advanced spy satellite has successfully located yet, the absolute next devastating phase of Iran's ongoing military campaign is already fully loaded and patiently waiting. 57 entire Muslim nations quietly stood right on the sidelines and passively watched Iran fiercely fight entirely alone. Iran completely proved that it did not even really need them. That is the one terrifying sentence that changes everything. But the profound implications of that terrifying sentence extend far beyond just the military domain. What we are witnessing in real time is the rapid, irreversible unraveling of the post-war financial architecture. For exactly 50 years, the global economic system has rested comfortably on a single foundational pillar, the petrodollar. The underlying agreement was always incredibly simple. The United States provides absolute military security to the oil-producing Gulf states, and in exchange, those wealthy states sell their vital energy resources exclusively in American dollars. That specific financial arrangement is exactly what allows the United States to run massive multi-trillion-dollar deficits without instantly collapsing its own domestic economy. But if American military power can no longer guarantee that physical security, and if advanced American air defense systems cannot successfully intercept incoming hypersonic threats, the entire logical foundation of the petrodollar completely evaporates. Why would any sovereign nation continue to hold trillions of dollars in American debt when the military supremacy quietly backing that specific currency has just been publicly shattered? The harsh reality is that they will not. The BRICS nations, alongside dozens of heavily observing countries across the global south, are currently accelerating their strategic plans to completely bypass the Western financial system. They are actively building parallel financial infrastructure, alternative payment clearing networks, and independent trading mechanisms. The massive geopolitical earthquake currently happening in the Middle East is merely the violent physical catalyst for a much larger permanent financial revolution. Furthermore, this specific conflict has completely democratized advanced asymmetric warfare. The Pentagon spent the last 40 years and countless trillions of dollars perfecting the ultimate global strike capability, built heavily around massive nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and highly advanced stealth fighter jets. Iran just definitively proved that a sovereign nation operating under some of the most crushing economic sanctions in modern human history can successfully develop indigenous hypersonic technology capable of rendering those trillion-dollar platforms completely obsolete. The era of the massive aircraft carrier, serving as the ultimate unchallengeable projection of global power, is now officially over. They are no longer terrifying instruments of absolute dominance. They are simply enormous, incredibly expensive floating targets waiting patiently to be struck by weapons, moving at 15 times the speed of sound. Every single regional power currently watching this conflict is already aggressively restructuring their entire military procurement strategy. The ultimate consequence of this massive global realignment will inevitably crash directly into the domestic American economy. The American public remains blissfully unprepared for the severe structural shock that is rapidly approaching. For over 80 consecutive years, the incredibly high American standard of living has been silently subsidized by unquestioned military dominance and global reserve currency status. When the global supply chain fundamentally fractures, and when the baseline price of crude oil permanently settles above $150 a barrel, the resulting inflationary firestorm will completely devastate the middle class. The entrenched political class currently residing in Washington will very soon face a catastrophic domestic crisis utterly unlike anything witnessed since the Great Depression. The geopolitical map of the entire world is currently being rapidly redrawn, not by traditional diplomatic treaties politely signed in luxurious European capitals, but by raw physics and undeniable battlefield mathematics. The old international order, comfortably built on the absolute certainty of Western military and financial supremacy, has fundamentally cracked beyond any hope of repair. The next turbulent chapter of global history will absolutely not be dictated by the traditional superpowers who spent the last century writing all the rules. It will be defined entirely by those who possess the technological capacity and the sheer strategic willpower to boldly call their bluff. The hypersonic era has finally arrived, and it has brought the entire old world completely crashing down with it. If this analysis helped you understand the massive geopolitical and economic earthquakes we are currently living through, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is exactly what allows us to keep cutting through the mainstream narrative and bringing you the unfiltered truth about our rapidly changing world.